Listen, starting new project scenes is tedious and repetitive, and I hate it. Not the implementation of the new idea that I have, but the project and the scene file setups. And these often include folder structures, setting up my scene grid and scene scale, setting up the default map lighting, controlling the auto exposure in UE5, creating and importing the standard mesh files to use, creating and setting up base master materials, and much more. And doing all this just eats up a lot of time. And I don't want to do this every time completely from scratch, nor do I want to look for previously used project files to modify to my current project. So instead, I have a set of templates and a set of files that has everything I need to start a new project and a new scene with, all ready to go. Because you need to go from an idea to prototyping in a short amount of time. And having these ahead of time helps to begin prototyping ideas with almost no setup. You have an idea, you jump right into the game engine or Maya scene file or your 3D modeling application or your texturing app and begin testing things out. And creating these template files will help you do this. You will also constantly be adding new files, new templates, and updating existing ones to make your work easier to start. So here are 11 different base files templates that I use to start my projects with. One is base Maya scene file that's been updated to correct grid size and imported human reference scale placed into display layer ready to go. This helps me to just open up the scene or anytime I need a new scene and begin working. I don't need to bring this scale reference in and import it every time, nor do I need to set up my grid every time. 2 is Unreal Engine human scale references as FBX files. I like using the Unreal Engine human reference for scale, which helps me to create my environments, my levels to correct dimension and proportion. And I exported this model from UE5 and I have them as FBX files to use in Maya, in Substance Painter, or whatever other software I need. And you can export these Unreal Engine mannequins yourself to use for scale in your own projects. And it can be done in UE5, can be done in UE4, and you can simply export them from Unreal Engine as FBX files. And I have a tutorial on how to do this if you want to check that out. 3 is standard modular environment assets as FBX files. These are a set of simple standard FBX modular assets. They are set to standard dimensions of a human reference scale that's about 6 feet tall, and these assets are for walls, for floors, ceiling, windows, doors, and stairs. And all of these can be imported into any game engine, and they can be used right away to help you block out your environments with these assets as placeholders. So instead of having to create the modular assets, you can use these as a starting point and then just simply replace them with something else when you actually have something to use. But this allows you to prototype and block out your scenes very quickly and get something going without having to create something before so you can prototype your idea later. You simply have these, import them, and begin to prototype your idea right away. And then I have the standard modular environment assets, the same ones as FBX files, but imported into UE5. Assign a clean off-white material onto them, set up my block and volumes, and with these I can start my UE5 environment scenes and begin prototyping using these modular assets as placeholders extremely quickly. I simply open up my UE5 project, bring those into my project, and begin prototyping my scene. Again, not having to set these up ahead of time, I just simply have them, bring them in, and I begin prototyping within minutes to get my idea, to get my scene going. Next up are UV grid textures. These grid textures are used for UVing in Maya. So instead of using the default checker pattern, which I don't like to use, I use these UV grid textures instead. They help to UV the meshes with a lot more precision. It shows me which parts of the mesh need to be UV'd, if the UVs are stretching, if the UVs are flipped, and I can judge my textile density a lot quicker. Something that's a lot more difficult to do and to tell when you're using the default UV checker pattern. And I have a set of these UV grid textures that I can swap to, but I have a couple of favorite ones that I usually go with. Then I have tiling planes for floors and for walls, and these are FBX files. These are tiling planes that are 3x3 quads, with each of the quads occupying 0 to 1 space, and all of them are overlapping and sitting on top of each other. And this helps to show texture repetition when you are actually working on tile and textures. This is extremely useful to help you find any seams and to see how your textures repeat over a larger plane surface and how they would actually work when you apply them onto larger surfaces inside the game engine. And these FBX files can be imported into Maya. You can import it into Substance Painter, which I often use, and of course in UE5 or any other software or game engine where you need to test your tile and textures and see how they repeat. Next up is Substance Painter scenes with the tiling planes. So the same tiling planes from before as FBX files. I have two Substance Painter scenes set up with these FBX files being used to apply your materials and to create your tile and textures onto. The first scene is the floor and the second scene is the wall. So if I'm creating tile and textures and I'm creating one for the floor or one for the wall, I use one of these scenes, open it up, and I just begin to create my tile and texture by applying materials and building up the tile and texture and testing to see how that repetition of the texture, how that tiling will look across a larger surface and to see if there's any seams. And I use this in Substance Painter a lot. Next up is UE5 Default Map Lighting using Lumen. This is a UE5 default map with standard lumen lighting, which includes the following actors: a directional light, a skylight, sky atmosphere, height fog, player start, and a post-process volume to control auto exposure. Some of these properties for certain actors have been changed to make the scene look better, as well as the post-process volume has been inserted so I can control my auto exposure. This is where your lighting makes automatic adjustments based if you are in a dark environment or a bright environment, and you don't have that compensation happening in real time to adjust auto exposure. And I clamp those and I control those values. And this map also has a scale reference inserted to help me test my scale, dimensions, and proportions of the environments I create. Now you could use the basic map template and it contains some of these actors, but it does not include the post-process volume, so you can control auto exposure, so you will have to set that up every time, as well as some of the values that I changed for the directional light. So instead I have a scene that's ready to go right away, instead of having to insert and adjust some of those actors every time. Then I have UE5 HDRI Lighting Scene. This scene is entirely lit using HDR image that's used for the light. And it's lit entirely with a skylight that uses that HDR image. It also has a scale reference inserted, as well as a sky sphere setup with a material applied. So I can also not only use the skylight to cast lighting using HDR image, but that same image is also being used to create a backdrop or a background to have more depth and to give me more point of reference of the environment as I'm testing my scenes and testing my lighting. And HDR image lighting is extremely powerful, extremely realistic of lighting your environments. And this scene has everything set up ready to go for me to open and just start using the HDR images to light my scenes with. Then I have a set of standard master materials and material instances I can use to prototype my environments with. Many of these materials are for standard tiling materials with many properties to be changed. So you can control your tiling, you can control your offset, your rotation, you have normal map intensities, you have roughness controls, many different masks you can adjust and tweak for whatever textures you are using. So instead of having to create these standard master materials every single time, or having to look for them and then modify them somewhere else and then bring them over into my current project, I just simply use the existing ones that I have, create a material instance from it, plug in my existing textures that I'm using, and begin to adjust and begin to apply them to surfaces, to my environments. And if I need to modify it, I would just duplicate the material and then begin to expand on it further, modify the existing setup. So I already have those ready to go. And you can do this with many other materials. You can even create your material functions to be reused over and over again to bring it into your existing project. So having these set up ahead of time saves you a lot of time. And again, just go from your idea to prototyping and blocking things out very quickly. And these master materials work really well with the modular assets that I have. And then I also have the default LUT, which is a color lookup table used in UE5. And it's a simple image, it's a small image that has the default color grading information that can be used in UE5. So you would just make adjustments to a screenshot inside Photoshop with this default color lookup table image. Then you save this image with whatever adjustments you've made in Photoshop, such as color balance, color correction, brightness, saturation, and so on. Save this LUT image and then use it in UE5 to make color corrections to your scene from the color lookup table. And this default LUT you can grab online. But instead of me having to constantly find it, look it up, I have it in my folder, in my templates, that I can just grab and use it in Photoshop to make adjustments, export it out, and then save it to be used in UE5. Now, these are just a few you could start with, and these are just a few that I have that I constantly use. There are many more files, many more templates, depending on what software, what game engine, what game you create for, and have them ready to go when needed. So spend a bit of time creating, collecting, and setting these up. Place them into your folder and always have it handy and ready. And then use it when you need it to start new projects and begin to test your ideas very quickly.